This particular session has been divided into two different topics. So we are going to discuss about introduction to precision fermentation and cellular agriculture. So I'm going to talk about cellular agriculture first, and then I'm going to talk about precision fermentation. So once I will finish the presentation for cellular agriculture, we'll take a break for 15 minutes, and then we'll start the precision fermentation. So before I start this presentation, do you have any questions with respect to the formatting? If you want me to change something, or if you have any questions specific to the topic, or if you want me to talk about something in the topic specifically? Nothing? I was expecting that answer, so thank you. Okay, so very well. Cellular agriculture, and you all have already been informed about my name, or I have been introduced you to you. So my name is Ashutosh Singh. I am an associate professor at University of Guelph. My research is in food and bioprocessing mostly, specifically food waste valorization. Cellular agriculture or precision fermentation is one aspect of research that I'm involved in, and that's the reason why I like this topic a lot, and it is something which is very, very current. But before we start getting deep into the core of cellular agriculture, we'll discuss a few things on what would be the outline of the presentation for today, okay? So I'll give you a brief background on why we are talking about cellular agriculture, why it is an important topic. I will also explain you in the context of alternative proteins and how it is related to cellular agriculture. We'll also have an introduction to cellular agriculture. Now, cellular agriculture is an agriculture, but then there is two types. One is a cultured meat, another one is acellular agriculture, which we basically are aware of most of the time. So we'll discuss about that. And then we'll discuss about the cellular agriculture products. I'll give you some of the examples here, mostly about different companies and different products that have been launched in the market right now in North America, in Europe. I don't have many examples from India, but you should be able to connect it in one way or other. And then I'll talk to you about the market landscape of cellular agriculture and precision fermentation. And then we'll talk about the challenges, the needs and the opportunities. And this will be the most interesting part, because this is where, as a researcher, for me, the opportunities lies. Like whenever I see a specific field of interest, I always try to find what the challenges are there so that I can find a technical solution. As an engineer, that is what we do. We find technical solutions, right? Very well. So food security and population, that's the very first thing that we are going to talk about. So food security, the word security, if I have to call myself food secure, it means that I should have access to enough food, not just any food, but it has to be a nutritious food, good for my health, and it should be affordable enough for me to buy it, right? But what you will find in the current time, after the COVID-19, I have seen majority of the countries in the world, they have inflation. There's a lot of price increase for the common food products that people used to buy earlier. And you will see as an example on the very left-hand side, this is from the Canadian perspective. So if you look at from the Canadian perspective, this is for a family of four. So I have a family of four. So me, my wife, my two kids. For me, if I have to feed my family well, in terms of like giving them a nutritious food, I have to spend approximately $1,244 a month just on food. And if you're also paying for your house, now that we call as mortgage, or here we call it as EMI, that you pay for your loan. So if I have taken a loan, I pay a mortgage to the bank. So if I'm paying the mortgage to the bank, I'm paying for the car, I'm paying for my kids, let's say medical bills or anything, everything included, I'm left with minus $230 every month. So I don't save any money. So people are always interested in saving, right? Where exactly will you cut your expenses? The very first thing that we cut is on food. We'll start trying to buy alternatives, right? So even if you are earning enough with inflation and the changes that is happening globally, we are still food insecure. We are not food secured. So we always need to find alternatives that are nutritious, but they are also affordable and sustainable. Sustainability is a very key point here. And then if you look at the graph at the very bottom on the left hand side, you will see the world population, how it is increasing from 2019 to 2022. So from 7.9%, it has went up to 9.2%. And how much of that population is undernourished? That undernourished is approximately 735 million. That's even like 2 times or 3 times of the US population. So those many people are undernourished. They don't get enough food or nourished food or good food or healthy food for themselves. The other point is that if your population of the world is increasing, what is the best thing that you can do? You have to produce more. And if you to produce more, you have to use your land resources. Do we have limited or we have unlimited land resources? It's very limited, right? So if we keep on changing our forest areas into agreeable lands, what will happen is all the agreeable lands will start being diminishing down and we will have deforestation, right? So we don't want to be in that type of situation. We want to be in a situation in which we are able to produce more with whatever capabilities that we have right now. We don't want to use more. And that is where this whole thing comes up. So what you will see is that with the 56% more food that would be required in 2050 to feed the 10 billion population that we might have in 2050, depending upon what the growth rate is right now, we don't have enough opportunities with respect to the land resources that we have. So we have to find alternative way of producing more food. And that is where this whole quotation from World Resource Institute comes in to picture, or like you will understand, is that to adequately feed more than 9 billion people by 2050, the world must close a 70% gap between the amount of food produced today and that would be needed in mid-century. That's a pretty huge number. Don't you agree? So this is the context that will set up why we are talking about cellular agriculture and why we should be looking into it. Now let's look into the protein consumption part. Now this is a very interesting topic. Now from the Indian perspective, that's why I asked you to have a very open mind. So from an Indian perspective, we are more inclined towards vegetarian protein, the pulses, the cereals, the grains. Those are our primary sources. The milk would be a primary source of our protein. If you're a non-vegetarian or over lacto-vegetarian, you'll be going into the egg proteins. That would be one of the sources of the protein. But for the rest of the world, they are meat eaters, right? So their primary source of protein is meat. And that creates a completely different set of problems, because if you see the trends, like for example, India is looking at only 14 kgs per capita meat consumption in 2021. That's a pretty less number. And if you're looking at Portugal or if you're looking at United States, you're looking at 149 kgs of meat. And in that, primary would be your beef protein, you'll have your pork, and you'll have your other meats. That would be your seafood. Another thing, the 58 kg is basically your poultry. So chicken is the primary source, KFCs, McDonald's. Those are our primary sources of protein for most of the kids. But beef, pork, these are also a major chunk of our protein sources in North America. But for India, you'll have those as a very small source. Our reliance on grains, cereals is very heavy, right? So that's the reason why our protein consumption from that sources are very less. And as the population increases, do you think the protein consumption will increase? Yes or no? Why? Why do you think that protein consumption will increase as the population increases? So if you have your population and you have your protein consumption, how are they related? If they are directly related, there has to be some sense, right? Then our population is pretty huge in India. Why is our protein consumption not increasing? You're right. Yes, we do have alternative sources. Even soybean is available in North America. Why are people not interested in that? Think about this way. So if let's say if you have one person here, so and you have the same person in a different alternative world. Here, that particular person is, I will go in rupees, is earning around 40,000 per month, and here he's earning 400,000 per month. Do you think the choices of food will change if they're earning more? If you earn more, will you be more interested in buying meat? No, until unless you are pure vegetarian, that would be a different case. But I'm just saying, if you are a non-vegetarian and you have an option, you're earning a lot of money, will you be ending up buying more meat? Majority of the times, that's the relationship that has been seen. So, because as the income increases, our reliance on meat protein increases, and that is the reason why you will see this growth difference between India and different other countries. Because when you're looking at the per capita income of Indians and the per capita income of other countries, individuals in other countries, our choices of food will differ. It also depends on the availability, what we have, but it also depends upon what we can afford. If I can afford mutton, I'll definitely buy mutton because it's good for health, right? That's the way we look at it, we perceive it. It's also based on the perception that you have. So that's how the relationship is, because as the population will increase, as your economic value or your own economics increase, you will be tend to purchase more meat. Now, meat consumption is related in many ways. So you will have this in this particular graph also from Godfrey et al. You'll see the meat consumption in basically in India has remained more or less constant. For the rest of the country, specifically China, it has increased significantly, right? So it is going like in an exponential curve as the population has increased, as their purchasing power has increased. When was Chinese economy started? When did the Chinese economy started going up? In the late 1990s, right? So if you look at the late 1990s and the 2010, it's an exponential growth. So because their economic progress improved, the income of the people improved, they were able to purchase better food. And if the meat was their primary source of protein, so they were able to purchase more of that. Now, another aspect. Now, we have discussed about the meat, right? Beef, pork, chicken, they all require land. So land resources have to be used. Now, if you are in North America or in Europe, if you have livestock farming, now when you define agriculture, for example, so agriculture is not just crops, it also has livestock, aquaculture, right, fishery, and any other? Majority would be these. So you'll have your fisheries, you'll have your aquaculture will be there, you have your livestock there, and then you have the crop. Now, crop is our primary source of food. Then comes the livestock. Now, for the livestock, if somebody has a livestock farm, if let's say somebody has a dairy farm, or somebody has like a beef farm, so where they're rearing cows for meat, or even if they're rearing goats, or if they're rearing, let's say, pigs for meat, they have to have pasture land, they have to provide the feed. That whole thing adds to a lot of stress on the environment. So more and more land has to be used if you are more focused on the meat production. Might not be in India, but the rest of the world, yes, it will happen. So the croplands and pastures right now occupy half of all the vegetated lands today. And the environmental degradation of that land use is another aspect that adds to the negative notion to livestock production, because the amount of water that would be required or amount of GHG that is being emitted out is pretty significant. It's very, very high. If you're looking at, like, from the dietary perspective, if you're in the vegan, you're looking at 1.5 tons CO2 per person. But if you're more of a meat lover, you're looking at 3.3 tons CO2 emitted per person. So that's a huge number in emission of CO2, and that will lead to global warming, right? And that's why even in the COP29, the COP20, in the previous ones, they have always talked about livestock production, how we should reduce or our reliance on the livestock for the meat production. And this particular graph on the left hand side, you will see, so land use, fertilizers, transportations, feed processing, generation of the feed, transportation of it, and then you're looking at the growth of your livestock. All of that, this 39% is just coming from the livestock. The amount of GHGs that are coming out is just from the livestock. That's a huge amount, and that is also another reason why we are interested in looking for alternative to meat proteins. We are looking at plant-based proteins just because of that, because we want to reduce the amount of GHGs that are being emitted in the environment. Now, why should we be interested in cellular agriculture? We have already discussed that, and these are the key points from there. So the animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of global deforestation, because more and more land would be required for the pastures. It is also the major contributor to foodborne illnesses and zoonotic disease outbreaks. If you are not careful, you would have heard about swine flu, avian flu, right? So those are all related to zoonotic disease, right? So that's what happens if you're not careful. And then it is also leading driver of antibiotic resistance. Now, why? Because when you're looking at livestock agriculture, you want your cows, you want your pigs to be in good health. So you're basically using a lot of antibiotics to keep them healthy. Now, those antibiotics are there in their body. If the people are consuming it, that leads to antibiotic resistance. So if it is also there, like if you are pumping antibiotics into dairy cows, antibiotics are there in the milk, that milk you drink, it adds to that antibiotic resistance. So that's why it becomes the whole chain of antibiotic movement adds to this. We don't want that. So that's why another aspect would be, because we don't want antibiotic resistance to increase, we should reduce our reliance on the meat, and we need to find an alternative to it. And also the inhumane processing and practices. Yes. Accumulation of antibiotics leads to resistance because more and more you get used to it, right? So the bacteria, if they are being subjected to the same antibiotics again and again, they're also going through evolution. So they are also going to have strains that would be resistant to those antibiotics then. And we might not be able to fight them after that. I'll give you a very basic example on that aspect. So when I was in India, if anything happens to me, if I go to a doctor, the very first thing they used to give me is antibiotics. So when my kids in Canada, if I take them, if they have cough or fever, if I take them to the doctor, they won't prescribe antibiotics at all. They will ask us to like wait for 3 days. If it doesn't subside in the next 3 or 4 days, only then they will prescribe the antibiotics, because they are very careful about this antibiotic resistance development. I am actually immune to many of those antibiotics, don't even work for me. They have to look for higher dosage of that. So that happens. That is actually the case, and that's the reason why we are very interested in this aspect. So it also accounts for 14 to 18% of the global house gas emissions. And you can actually see the antibiotic use for in milligrams per kg. The maximum is being used in Cyprus. I think India was not there in that particular data plan, but you will see US is somewhere there, United Kingdom is there. Yeah, so US is up here, and then UK is down here. Norway Norway is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and they are very, very careful about what goes in their body. And it's also called as the happiest place on earth or something like that. It's also in one of those lists. That is one of the reasons, because they are very careful about what goes in their body, what type of food you eat. You will see, you have heard about the term GMOs, right? Genetically modified organisms. So now GMOs, if I ask, would you like to eat anything which is GMO, what would be the first answer you'll say? No, right? No, genetically modified organism is not good for us. But honestly, what percentage of the food that you eat every day is actually GMO? Can you guess? Is it like 10%, 20%, 50%, more than 50%? It's more than 50%. The tomatoes that you buy in the market, genetically modified. Potatoes that you buy in the market, genetically modified. Majority of the food, until unless they are grown organically, they have been using, let's say, the seeds which were natural, wild varieties. That's real. But wild varieties are not there anymore, right? So we are eating a lot of genetically modified organisms anyway. Now, what is cellular and acellular agriculture? Now, the topic is very, very interesting. So if you look at agriculture, now agriculture is with development of food products. Now, cellular agriculture is also defined as manufacturing of agriculture products like keratin, silk. Now, the silk that I'm talking here would be the spider silk. You're using the protein that is the spider silk protein. I can use that, put it into an E. coli, ferment it, and get that silk protein. So, cellular agriculture is defined as a manufacturing of agricultural or animal or bio-inspired, bio-based products from cell cultures. Now, these cell cultures, either they are producing the product or they are the product themselves. So, either you eat the cells that you are fermenting, the growing, those are your product, or the cells are producing a product extracellularly. So, the cell is releasing the product into the cytoplasm, and we can do the cell lysis and extract the product out. So, mostly the proteins that we get. You will get an example in the session tomorrow about insulin. That's one of the extracellular product. Proteins, enzymes that are being used, developed by fermentation process, is an extracellular product. Now, if the cell itself is a product, how do we actually manufacture that? That is a very interesting part. Now, that is where cultivated meat comes into picture. If the cell becomes a product itself, that's cultivated meat is an example, but many a times we just use as a biomass, the whole cell as a biomass or a source of protein for ourselves. Now, if that particular protein was not released, let's say outside the cell, but if it was only released within the cell, I can eat the cell directly to get the whole as a protein source, right? So that becomes like cell biomass as a product. Now, these cells as a product itself, for that you have to do the extraction and isolation of stem cells. Now, this is specifically for cultivated meats. Now, the stem cells have the capability of growing into different forms of tissues. So, they can develop fat, they can develop muscles, they can develop skeletal tissues. So, the stem cells have the DNA in them to grow into different forms, and if you give it a shape, it can give you the whole product. Then you are providing them the cell growth, the proliferation, and the differentiations in a bioreactor, and then you harvest it, and that becomes the whole product itself. And then you have the acellular agriculture. Now, the acellular agriculture is something that you should be more familiar with. It includes products obtained or purified from host organisms such as bacteria, yeast, microalgae, which are grown via fermentation. Now, acellular products, as you can see from the left-hand side, are mostly genetically modified. So, what you do is you modify the genome or the DNA of an E. coli. You add your foreign DNA into it, or the interest, the DNA of interest, which will develop a specific protein of interest or the product of interest. That is called recombinant DNA technology, right? Precision fermentation, before it became precision fermentation, it used to be called recombinant DNA technology production or processing. It just got a fancy name and became precision fermentation because it's very precise. We are only interested in one specific product, and that's the reason why it is called precision fermentation. Now, it uses techniques such as molecular biology, acellular production will use techniques such as molecular biology, synthetic biology. It is used to produce molecules such as proteins and fats that can be an animal product, milk and egg, or it can be a plant-based product such as vanillin. Now, vanillin is vanilla essence. So that's another product which is made. Anthocyanin. Anthocyanin is a natural color which is found in fruits. And then, since the cells used to produce are not the part of the final product, they are called acellular. If the cell was the final product, it would become cellular or cell-based. Now, methodology used to produce these acellular product is referred as precision fermentation. And that is the reason why I wanted to go through cellular agriculture first and then into precision fermentation, so that I can get an idea of what we are dealing with in precision fermentation. Now, fermentation in itself is a very important technology. As a unit operation, it has been very active in the food industry, in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, what fermentation involves are the sources. So, you have your fungi, you have your bacteria, your algae, or you can use your plant cells, and you provide it an optimized environment to grow. So, you provide it with nutrients that are required, and then you provide it with the temperature, the pH that is required, and you let it grow. And once it has grown, it will produce the product that you want. Now, if I may ask you a very simple question, do you remember the sigmoid curve? Do you know what a sigmoid curve is? Right? It's an S. Now, this is mostly your growth with respect to time. Correct? So, you have your lag phase, the log phase, the stationary phase, and that's what we call as a sigmoid curve. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Now, for this, you will be mostly aware of fungi, bacteria being used, and that's what we generally do even in the labs. When we are doing a sigmoid curve analysis, you'll be using a bacteria or a fungi or a yeast, because they have a very quick growth phase, and that's the reason why we use them for acellular production, because they have a very quick growth phase. They will double in the matter of minutes or hours. If you're looking at stem cells, for example, to make cultured meat, stem cells double once in 24 hours. So, one stem cell will get doubled into 2. So, the growth phase is slow. It's there, but it's slow. So, that's why the production differs for both the technologies. Acellular production is, that's why it is very commonly utilized in the food industry, because you can produce quickly and you can produce in bulk. And then what is involved in the fermentation is your purification of the final product. Another question for you, out of all these steps, growth, development of the product, and harvest, which one do you think requires the most capital? Capital means money. The downstream part or the upstream part? You all have had courses in fermentation, I think. So, downstream processing or the purification aspect is the most costly process in the fermentation technology, and that is where the maximum amount of capital is invested, right? Now, fermentation is a very important process. Why? This is the slide that is going to tell you, because it can be used to produce enzymes that can improve protein functionalization or coagulation. One of the examples would be production of tofu. Another would be, it can be used to develop flavoring ingredients. Now, this flavoring ingredients for Impossible Burger. Have you heard about Impossible Burger? Or have you heard about Beyond Burger? or Beyond Meat. Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger are meat alternatives. So they make plant-based meat products, which would resemble a meat product, but they are not meat products. They are plant-based. So to get the same texture, the same taste, the mouth feel, you need to develop ingredients through fermentation, and that was what they found. Is in regular meat you will have hemoglobin. They found soy hemoglobin. Impossible Burger has a patent for that. Is soy hemoglobin. So they found hemoglobin in soy protein or in the soybean, and they grow that using acellular fermentation process or acellular product development, and then use it into their product to provide you that mouth feel, the texture, the feel, the smell, the taste of a burger, of meat, because that hemoglobin adds to that, right? That adds the flavor. It is also used to develop growth factors. Now, these growth factors would be your hormones, the proteins which are required for the cells to grow. For stem cells, you need certain growth factors when you're making cultured meat, and you will learn that they are the most important part when we are looking into the cultured meat production. They are also used to develop gelatin and some of the products like the keratin, the silk. And that's why the fermentation is very, very important in the food industry. Otherwise, people have given you examples of beverages. Yes, beverages, alcoholic beverages, fermentation is there, but that has been there for centuries, right? We all are aware of wine making, beer making processes, but nowadays fermentation has got a very different application from the food industry perspective, and precision fermentation or acellular fermentation or acellular product development is playing a very important role. From the Indian context, you will see as we get into the market landscape, you will realize that in India itself, if you want to set up a startup, the best startup would be acellular product development. If you are able to develop proteins through acellular fermentation or precision fermentation, you are going to help reduce the population of undernourished people, because that is the most important thing, because accessibility to good food, accessibility to nutritious food, that's the most important thing that is happening, and fermentation is playing a very key role in that. Now, another example would be this classic cutlet. I found this as an example and I was very interested to bring it here. Can you guess what it is made of? Is it like does it look like a chicken? Does it look like potato patty? What does it look like? Just guess. There's no marks associated with this. I couldn't find a bigger picture than that, so that's why I don't have it. But this one is a fungi. It's a fungus. The company Emergy Foods. So this is the example of where the whole biomass or the cell is being used as a product. So they grow this fungi, and that particular fungi itself is the product, and they are using this to develop alternatives to bacon, alternatives to chicken. So this is one example of classic cutlet, and then you have a crispy cutlet, which would be like a crispy protein. You can find an alternative to KFC protein that you buy, right? And if you look into on the right hand side with respect to the nutritional profile, sodium is there, for example, for the taste perspective. Vitamin D, the calcium, the iron, they are still pretty good in terms of the nutritional profile. But what they don't have is that cholesterol, the fat, the bad fat, which might impact you. And that's why it is also gaining a lot of interest. Other companies that are involved in this area of product development would be Atlas Food Corporation and Corn. So Corn, if I remember correctly, is a European company. I might be wrong. Please don't sue me. Okay, I will take my words back. is a food company somewhere in the world. Now, other examples of fermentation would be development of high source value ingredients, such as the gelatin. Now, gelatin, which is produced through fermentation process, is being used to make gummy bears. Have you heard about gummy bears? It's a very common candy which is loved by kids. Even I do like it. It is also used to make proteins, animal-free proteins. For the milk protein, it is also being used to make different types of milk proteins. So you can get milk alternative, dairy-free milk. Novozyme is a company which actually uses that to make enzymes. And you can see from the right hand side that it is being used to make food enzymes. It is also being used in the cellular agriculture products. It is being used to make purified proteins, and depending upon the different things. Now, formation or development of these products require a lot of input, and most of the input that we are interested in is the feedstock or the medium that is used for the growth of the microorganisms. We'll be discussing that in the precision fermentation. Now, what are the advantages of fermentation? So, it's low cost, definitely, as compared to other unit operations in the food industry. Fermentation is widely used to produce industrial chemicals, feed ingredients, fuels, food products, and others. It's a proven technology. It has been there for centuries. We are aware of how to use it. We know its positives or the advantages and disadvantages, and it's easier to modify. And fermentation processes currently are working at scales of 600,000 liters, and they are being used, and downstream processes as well are very well established for most of the fermentation processes. Rapid production, that is where we were talking about. So bacteria and the yeast and the fungi, they have a very rapid growth phase. So they double very quickly. So you are able to produce more and produce in bulk very, very quickly. So productivity is very high due to short doubling time. The batch processes only requires a few hours. And it has a very established R&D process. You'll see in every institution, majority of the institutions that have food engineering in India or food engineering elsewhere in the world will have someone or at least 2 or 3 faculty members working in the areas of fermentation. It's a very well established and very research oriented program, and it's a very established R&D. Now let's come into the cultured meat aspect. So we have talked about the acellular agriculture. Now let's talk about the cellular agriculture from the cultured meat aspect. Now the cells are being grown as a product themselves. Now one of the examples that I gave you was the fungi that is being used as a classic cutlet or a crispy cutlet as an alternative to bacon. Now in this particular case, you are basically using tissues from the animals. So you, just like a biopsy, you take out the tissues, you grow them in the lab, you find the ones which are growing well, you take that, you put it into a fermentation process, make it large, make it bigger, and then use that as a product itself. This particular paper is really, really interesting. I would really suggest if you get an opportunity to go through this particular paper. Dr. Chaudhary, who is one of the authors here, was my undergraduate classmate. He's in Singapore right now. I think it is his research group that has published this research article. It's a really interesting research article where they have talked about the cellular agriculture and the cellular production, mostly cultivated meat. Now, this cultivated meat is a genuine animal meat that has very similar sensory and nutritional profile of conventional meat. It comprises of the same cell types arranged to provide the same three-dimensional structure as that of animal muscle or tissue. Okay. Now, what happens is that you take your pluripotent cell sources, the stem cells. Now, these stem cells can differentiate into different types of cells, right? So it can, some parts of the stem cells will go into muscle formation, some will go into the fat formation, some will go into the fiber formations. So all of that you separate out, you put that into a fermenter, and once you have put it into a fermenter, you grow it to an extent, you put it into a scaffold. Now this scaffold is either can be compostable or eatable itself. and you're growing, you provide the nutrients for these cells to grow, and that's where you get the whole structure of the meat itself. So if you want to make a chicken breast, you take the stem cells, you put it there, you grow it. Now some of the cells will make the fibers, the muscles, the fats, and then you arrange all of them into like a mold and let them grow. You provide them enough nutrients, and once you let them grow, that's how you'll get your chicken breast, the whole design of the chicken breast. So these are where the scaffolds are coming into picture. Now I have given an example of this pluripotent cells. So you're looking at embryonic stem cells, and you're looking at induced pluripotent cells, iPSCs and ESCs. No, the scaffold is not basically stating that. What the scaffold is doing is just providing the support for the cells to grow.
Okay.
The stem cells themselves have an idea what they want to become. So some of the stem cells, because of the DNA that they have, they will become, they will move into providing the fat cells, they will move into providing the muscle cells. So they will differentiate by themselves. So once you have identified which cell is moving into where, you collect them. So it's a very different process. So you take the cells out of the animal, you grow it in the lab first, differentiate it into different forms of cells that you need. So let's say if I have to make a chicken breast, as I said, so I need muscles, I need fat, right? So the cells that are growing into muscles I will collect those, I'll put them into the fermenter. The cells that are growing into fat, I'll take those, I'll put them into the fermenter, provide the nutrients for them to harvest, like to grow as much as possible so I can get enough. And then I take that and I put it inside the scaffold. And then I let them, and I will provide them the nutrients that are required for them to now grow into tissues, like with the muscles tissue, the fats. That's what the scaffold is allowing them to do. That's it. It's just giving them the three-dimensional structure, nothing else. Now, you have understood a little bit of the cellular agriculture or cultured meat. Now, there are areas that are very much of interest and opportunity that exist in this area are the culture media that is being used for the cells to grow, the cell line that we basically use for making the cultured meat, the scaffoldings which are being developed. I have already talked about the cell lines, the tissue culture. All of these areas will provide you opportunities for research. For example, let's say now access to cell line is a major issue. It's like when we are making the genetic database for the seeds. So we'll go for the wild varieties for different types of seeds. Some seeds will have drought resistance, some seeds will have salt tolerance, some seeds will have other properties. So we have to collect them, right? So when we are trying to develop a specific product, we need to have the perfect cell line for that. Access to those cell lines is an important area of research, or development of those cell lines or identifications of those cell lines is an important area of research. Scaffolds which are providing the support for your cellular agriculture or the cultured meat, the design of that is very important. If you can make it biocompostable, if you can make it biodegradable, or if you can even make it eatable. If I can design a scaffold from starch, let's say, that would be really good, right? So you have the starch, that starch can be consumed, but it's also, what would be the most important property of that scaffold? It has to provide a rigid environment, strength, right? So it should not break when the cells are growing, and it should also be able to allow the nutrients to flow through for the cells to grow. So keeping those properties in mind, if you are able to develop scaffold materials, now this becomes a material science related research, right? But it is completely a biological engineering research. So even if you have a background in mechanical engineering, specifically in material science, with an interest in biological materials, you can work in this area. And that is where exactly what I work on. So we are trying to develop starch-based scaffolds. Now those starch that we obtain are obtained from waste sources. Then you have a lot of research going on in the tissue engineering aspect. making the process much more faster, making the process much more cleaner. And then the culture media. Now, a very basic question for you. Now, if you want to grow a bacteria, what would be the nutrient that you will provide the bacteria to grow? What is the food for the bacteria to grow? Sugar, carbohydrates. What else? Proteins, nitrates, nitrogen. Anything else? You keep on saying things, I will say yes to it. I'm just asking. The basic, the most important that you would have heard about. Okay, fermentation of beer. What is the source? What is the feedstock? Barley, right? Barley is used. What does barley provide? Glucose. That gets fermented into ethanol. Yeast is used, right? Yeast is the host that will change glucose into ethanol. Am I correct? Now, if you are growing cultured meat, what are the things that you will provide for the cells to grow? What is required by you to grow? Do you need hormones to grow? Right? Do you need growth factors to grow? So you have to provide all of that to those stem cells and the muscle tissues and the cells to grow in the scaffolds, right? And those would be mostly obtained from pharmaceutical industries of highest purities, and it's very, very difficult to obtain them. But acellular production, that means recombinant DNA technology, can be used to produce growth factors. That's where your precision fermentation again plays a very important role in cultivated meat. So you're developing your growth factors, or you're producing your growth factors using precision fermentation. So that's another area of research that you have. Oh, sorry, let me go back. So scaffold materials, it has to be sustainable methods of production of these. For the bioreactor processing, the mode of production understanding, it will allow for the scaled production. The cell culture medium is the main cost driver. The reason being, when you're looking at those growth factors, if you're looking at the purest form of growth factors, they will cost you millions and millions of dollars. I will show you a table later on in the precision fermentation, or I think in this lecture itself. Now let's look into the industry or the market landscape for cellular agriculture. It's actually a growing area, it's a growing field, and India is also there. I think if you are able to see it properly, it would be clear meat or clean meat, something like that. And then what majority of the companies that you are seeing in this particular graph are startups. Now, these startups are also funded by the bigger institutions like Cargill and the bigger players, the Nestle. They are funding these startup companies to get into the alternative meat and alternative proteins. And the global demand for the plant-based meat is also increasing slowly. And that is what this particular graph is suggesting here. Now, most of the companies, what you are seeing here is that it's on a rise. The number of companies that are increasing in this area of research or in this area of production of food products is increasing day by day or year by year. So 2019 was a very good year for plant-based meats. From the Canadian perspective, Tim Hortons is the company which is provided, like it's a coffee place, like you have CCD, or you just call it cafe. You call it Cafe Coffee Day or Coffee Day now? Coffee Day? Okay. So similar to Coffee Day, we have Tim Hortons in Canada. Now, Tim Hortons, at one point of time, they started providing us with Beyond Burger. That was a alternative meat, plant-based protein products. So they went into collaboration with various of these alternative meat protein companies. Burger King has the very similar collaboration. The research from A.T. Kearney, they took into account saying some of the assumptions and what is going on in the market, what is the people's notion, how they feel about meat, and what opportunities are there for the alternative meat. What they were suggesting is that by 2040, you're looking at almost reduction of 50% in conventional meat production. So people's reliance on alternative meat would be very, very high by 2050. So people will be moving away from chicken, from meat, from beef, mutton, and other products, and they will be getting into this cultured meat area. It's an assumed projection, taking into consideration what the emotion is right now of the market. But I will not ask you to take it as is. Understand the market, understand if you are interested in setting up a startup for this, you have to be 100% sure that that particular product will have a market here. If I come and say I want to set up a cultured meat industry in India, I have to rethink it multiple times, right? I have to find the location. It's all about the location, right? So that is also a very important aspect in terms of this. The industry, this is another graph that is showing some of the companies that are going with business to business and business to consumer startups that have come up, and how the number of companies have improved or increased from 2015 all the way to 2019. So the number of companies involved in this cellular agriculture area has increased tremendously, and it's still increasing. More and more startups are coming into this picture. Now, let's look into the other challenges and opportunities that we have. Now, what we are going to discuss here is technology-specific challenges and technology-agnostic value chains. Now, when you're looking at technology-specific value chain, you're looking at the cell line development for the cultured meat. We already discussed about that. The cell culture media development, where you're looking at precision fermentation for growing growth factors. Scaffoldings, developing new types of scaffolds for the cultured meat, and designing new bioreactors, improving the bioreactor optimization processes. From the fermentation perspective, you're looking at the host strain development and engineering. If you're doing any genetic modification to your organism to produce more and more products, the feedstock that you basically use. So if barley is used for production of beer, is there an alternative that I can use, like one of the food waste that is available? Can that be used as a carbon source? If I'm able to use a food waste as a carbon source for my fermentation process, I'm going to kill two birds with one arrow, right? I'm going to reduce the GHG that is being produced because of the food waste, and I'm also going to develop a product that is going to add monetary value. Purification from the host, downstream processing is another area of research which people love to work in. I work in that area. Developing new types of downstream processing techniques which will give you the highly purified products is very, very important, and development of new bioreactors or designing new bioreactors. Now, when you get into plant-based meat alternatives, you're looking at a crop characterization optimization, raw material optimization again, and the production methods that are basically used. And if you're looking at the technology agnostic value chain, that means those that are not related to technology aspect, not engineering, let's say more on the management side. You're looking at the financing and services, the business services, the end product and new product lines that you have to come. So if you're working in the food science or developing new products, this would be the area of research that would be very, very interesting. Like, what is the current demand of the market? Like, what people are interested in? If there is, for example, when we are talking about the genetically modified organisms, right? The GMOs. Now, GMOs are something that we eat on a day-to-day basis. You'd be amazed to know that there are countries in the world that have banned GMOs for anything to do with baby food. You cannot have any form of GMOs for baby food. And that's a good thing. in my view, as a parent, I will say, if I have a notion in that aspect. But there are certain rules and regulations, right? So if you want to get into those type of research, you have to understand the policies of different countries and how these products can be launched there. Now, Good Food Institute, for example, from where I have taken this particular graph and some of the other sources, the sources that I've used for my presentation is the Good Food Institute. Now, Good Food Institute has been lobbying for alternative meat for a very long time, and they're a big supporter of that. And I like the idea, and I really appreciate if you can go onto the website of Good Food Institute, and you will find amazing resources on cellular agriculture, on fermentation, specifically for precision fermentation, and how this alternative meat or alternative or plant-based protein industry is basically increasing, and what are the demands for it. So they have done life cycle analysis, they have done techno-economic analysis onto different products, and they have identified what works, what doesn't work, and if it has to work, when will it work, whether it will work in 2024, it is going to work in 2020 or 2050. They have identified what is happening, the trend of majority of these areas. So brokerages and distribution, you're looking at the safety, QA, and regulatories. Not every country allows. So if you're looking at precision fermentation and making cultured meat is not approved by various countries. It's still at very approval stages. The FDA in USA has not approved many of the companies' products yet. They're still looking at what are the challenges associated with it, what might happen if you're drinking it. Now, these regulations change from country to country. I'll give you a very basic example of it. If you buy the real juice here, the orange juice, let's say, from the real juice company, that's made by Dabur, if I understand correctly. Now, on their Tetra Pak, do they say rich source of vitamin C? Do they say that? Yes or no? Or if you drink this, it will cure cancer. Can they say that? You will see, and you'll be amazed. If you go to different countries in the world, some of those countries will have this type of promotion on their Tetra Paks. That this can cure this, this can cure that. Why cannot they say it? Do you know why? Or just guess. Why cannot a company say that this particular juice, or if you drink real juice or real orange juice, you will be curing cancer? Why cannot they say that? I'm so sorry, I was not able to hear you. No, there are proven evidences that it works, but why cannot they say that?
Recently in FSSI in India, they said no products in India should come with any health claims, and they have given a apart from that, they said this health claim cannot be given in such a way that it won't give the exact result whenever any products, for example, there are a lot of products is added with fortified fortification is also done. Apart from that, there will be these products contain a lot of bioactives and all, but it won't give the exact result for all the community or all the people. It will vary with respect to persons.
So let's say, if I remember correctly, there is a medicine called as Dolo 650, which if you have fever, you basically have that. It's a paracetamol.
Yes. Yes.
Now, it's called 650 because it's 650 milligrams. It's a dosage. So if I take one tablet, it will reduce my fever. It's all about the dosage. Like how much of that orange juice do I need to drink to get cancer free? Can somebody tell me that? No, they cannot, right? And that's the only reason why they cannot mention that. Because you were right, like they cannot make that health claim because you don't know like whether you need to drink 10 packs or 4 packs. It might so happen that you might need 2000 packs. For somebody, it will work in 2 packs, but we don't know that. That efficacy is not available. And that is the reason why these things don't show up. And that is also the reason that people have some concerns. Like, for example, if I remember correctly, there was a case against Bonvita for claiming certain things in India, right? The same thing happens with the cultured meat products. Like, when the moment the ingredients that are being used, are they safe? How safe are they? We don't know. So a lot of research is going on in that aspect also. So that's also another opportunity for students to work in if you're looking into research areas for this. The QA and the quality assurance and the safety of the product that is developed through precision fermentation or the cultured meat products, that's another area of research. Now, other opportunity would be into the fermentation side. So you're looking at a novel strain engineering, so identifying new strains, using the right feedstock. So as I said, like if I can use a food waste as a carbon source, I might be able to reduce the total production cost. If I can reduce the production cost, I can reduce the cost of the product. Then identifying or enhancing alternative protein products, so providing high value ingredients from plant-based meat or cultivated meats, and a high volume, low cost manufacturing. So scale up and low cost manufacturing is another area or opportunity that exists for us. My research goes into this valorized waste streams, where we try to use different types of food waste materials, agricultural byproducts that can be used or valorized into mediums that can be used for the cells to grow. Now, this example, so this particular slide is talking about the medium, the cellular medium or the culture medium that is basically used. So the biggest cost for cellular agriculture comes from the cell culture medium, and it is often estimated with the 80% of the marginal cost of the end product. Now, FBS or fetal bovine serum or the serums, these are used for the cells to grow. These require growth factors. They have the growth factors and other things in them. So if you can develop a serum-free system, that might add or that might help reduce the overall cost. So serum is highly variable product, and any variation. So you don't get the same serum is not like if I buy it from this brand and I buy it from another brand, they are not the same. They'll vary. So you don't get the consistency in growth. So you need consistency. Now the batch which is produced this year might not be the same as the next year. And the serum such as FBS is the main ingredient in cell culture media, as it contains hormones, lipids, and growth factors that are essential for the cell proliferation. If you're the opportunity that exists is in developing or using serum-free media. Now, where the advantages that it provides is consistency. Because I'm not, how do you produce these serums? Do you have any idea? Not the serum-free media, the previous one. How do you produce FBS? From animals, right? Like live animals or dead animals? Live animals, right? Or dead animals? Live, dead. Live. So it is produced in live animals. You extract, right? So the point is that it will not be consistent then. It can never be consistent. So that's why you need a serum-free media. So the advantage is the consistency, the standardization, the safety. You can control the safety. You don't know. There are many things that you might not be able to control elsewhere, but you will be able to control. If you, okay, it's just like you developing something and you have control about on every aspect of it. If you have control on every aspect of that development of the product, you'd make sure that the safety is considered, the quality is considered, the consistency is considered. So better control over the cellular functions, ease of purification, enhances cell growth, viability, and expansion and ease of formulation. So disadvantage would be the cost, and the cost, because serum-free medias are costlier than FBS. Because more control you have, more you spend. Because every ingredient that you use, think about it. If I'm using the FGF and the TGF, these are your growth factors. If you look at on the right hand side, how many zeros are there? That itself is approximately $8 million. So amount per 20,000 liters is 2 grams. For 2 grams, 4 million. So the level of purity that you have to have is pharmaceutical grade. Pharmaceutical grade purity is very, very high. Food grade purity is lower. If I'm able to use a food grade level of purity for production of cultivated meats or for cellular agriculture, I would be able to reduce the cost of production. That is another aspect to work on. And it's all because of the growth factors, that all the cost that is involved here. So this was this particular work was done by Good Food Institute, where they identified the total cost of producing, and they also identified how you can reduce it. So if you're able to use food waste as the source for growing as a feedstock in the fermentation process for growing these growth factors using precision fermentation, you would be able to reduce the cost of production for these growth factors. So working in those areas is very, very important. So what are the key takeaways from this particular set of slides on cellular agriculture is the cellular agriculture can unlock opportunities to develop next generation meat over and make it more sustainable. Continued growth of alternative meat or alternative protein will provide the required push for the cellular agriculture industries. This field requires multidisciplinary knowledge to accelerate or sustain the current progress in the plant-based and the cultivated meat sector. So you all have an amazing opportunity because of the multidisciplinary background that you have right now. And there is a substantial room for innovation. So this field is not going anywhere. You have a lot of time. You can do a lot of research in this area, and you will be seeing in the next coming 5 years or 10 years, there's so much of research that has gone into, and there would be products that would be available in the market at that time. Okay. So after this particular slide, we are going to take a break for 15 minutes and then we'll resume again.